So now I want to cover some of the ecological impacts associated with this project, as well as more of the global issues that that people need to consider when we look at this project or any project that's similar to this. At Cherry Point, we already talked about the wetland loss. I mean, it was bad at 5.8 acres. It's almost ridiculous at 162 acres. Those wetlands are right next to a marine reserve, and then there's a lot at risk there. Coal dust is going to rob nearshore habitats of oxygen. Why that's particularly important at Cherry Point is that we have the Pacific herring population that exists right there, and it's distinct from other populations in that it breeds at a different time, so it provides a food source for salmon, which provide a food source for killer whales, orcas. It's at 5% of its historic levels at this point, and this is its only breeding area and the spawning area in the nearshore habitat here. So if we cover that with coal dust and it covers the eelgrass that they need to survive, I think that we look at that food source as disappearing, which I think would be a shame, because then there'll be ripple effects from that all through the tourism industry and fishing industry in this region. Ships that are just parked at piers burn a lot of diesel, and we looked at an 80,000 ton ship, which would be a small to mid-sized ship. A lot of the ships they're going to be using are going to be much larger. When those ships are sitting in port, just keeping their lights on, they are burning 4 tons of diesel fuel a day. They don't, at that point, measure it in gallons, they measure it in tons. And granted, they're not burning bunker fuel at that point, but it's still, more diesel particulates that are injected into the water and ejected into the air near those facilities. We're also very concerned in this area because at this point we have oil tankers in Puget Sound and the Juan de Fuca Straits. We have the increase coming from the tar sands in Canada. This would add an additional 400 ships in a very crowded shipping area. And the thing with bulkers is that those are the biggest and most underpowered ships out there, and they have a very poor safety record. And I can't imagine what would happen to the region if we had an oil spill in any area in Puget Sound or the Salish Sea. And then we move on to the global impacts. I already talked about 100 million metric tons of CO2. Do we really need to go down this path and add this additional burden on our Earth's atmosphere? And then I would also urge people to go out to Montana and Wyoming, where this coal is being mined, and look at the lands that are damaged out there and the lives that are ruined by the sheer impact of building these or digging these mines, which are large open mines that sometimes go many thousand feet into the ground. There's also a national and international impact of this economically. When you look at 48 million metric tons of going primarily to China, that would empower 250,000 new Chinese manufacturing jobs. And in the U.S., we're losing about 500,000 manufacturing jobs a year. This is not going to help that balance. Our guess at this point, because China is a 60% export economy, and the U.S. takes 40% of that 60%, that we're looking at 10,000 jobs a year being displaced by this coal, shipping a raw material to a competing economy. And then, the ocean acidification thing happens here, affects nearshore habitats here, but it happens all over the world, and that's a huge problem that we have done something that is so large that it's able to change the pH of something as large as the ocean. I think that, above a lot of things, should make us sit up and take notice. So kind of where I started here was a question. And I think all of us have to think about this, and wherever our intersection with this project is, do we want a peace train sort of solution here, or do we want a coal train sort of solution? And I think that's what we really need to start asking ourselves and thinking about this, and what sort of action do we take when confronted with this project overall. It's interesting that this for us is such a local issue, but I think this is a world issue, because it really will help us decide what course we take, if we're going to make some progress on climate change or not. And I think for us, we've always described this as drawing the line in the sand and moving forward towards a positive future rather than embracing a failed past. And I think other people need to look at that and make their own decision and figure out ways to get involved. If you're interested in this project and interested in getting involved, I would visit our website, which is www.re-sources.org, or look at the climatesolutions.org website, or look at the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal site. We're all working on this same issue together. Get engaged and get involved. Thank you very much for having me here today.